Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wrestling figure collectors. Hope you're all good. Welcome to your favourite podcast and mine, the UK Wrestling Figure Collectors Podcast. So, we are all set and ready to go for another fun-filled episode, and we're on episode 5. My name's Tom Finkill. This is Steve Taylor. Good morning, mate. Hello.
Good I'm all right. How are you?
Very good, as always.
Weirdly enough, then you did. I thought you were going to ask me how I was. You didn't. You said hello. So I answered a question that you didn't ask me. Never mind. It's episode 5. We are somehow made it to episode 5. Like we'll hopefully get way past episode 5. But episode 5 is where we are on our soft launch. Available at the moment on YouTube only. We will be getting it relatively quickly onto other platforms, but there's a reason why we're doing it, just to make sure we can deliver each and every week, which so far we have not failed on, but the day that it lands is changing, but we'll get there one way or another to a designated day each week. We'll get some really good feedback, get some great messages and some great emails, some fantastic support. So thank you all for that. It's massively appreciated. What we're doing this week, Tom?
Well, we are still looking at Netflix's own The Toys That Made Us. We did our first part in episode 4, and we're going to cycle through. We covered LJNs, we covered the Remco figures, we covered Hasbro's, and we slid very nicely into a cut-off point, which was the Jakks collection. So we're going to pick things up in 1996 when Jakks picked up the mantle and took over the WWF license. We're going to cover that today. We're also going to slide into some WCW Toy Biz, some ECW Original San Francisco Toy Making Company stuff as well, and finish it off, bringing it up to date with Mattel. So, going into Jakks, did you ever collect any Jakks before you're collecting now? Did you pick up any through the lineup? Okay, so for
nothing at all. So I mean, this is the thing where it kind of gets really muddy for me, I suppose, because I collected Hasbro's, and as soon as, to be fair, like I say, sort of WrestleMania 9, just after, that's when I kind of stopped watching wrestling. So I was definitely out by the green cards. I didn't have any Hasbro green cards. Yeah. So and then that was me. I was completely out of collecting then until fairly recently, 2014 or 15. So the Jakks thing is a big part. It's probably 12 years or something of the slot, maybe a bit more. Yeah. Of the figure producing timeline, and there's so much stuff in it. I just can never really get my head around it. So you were well in it at that time, so you can tell us all about it, man.
Yeah, excellent. So from my side, I was the one kid that didn't stop watching. Everybody else did. Everybody else sort of filtered out in like 93, 94. But I was the one kid that kept sort of persevering with it. And as we went through sort of primary school into secondary school, I was still sort of very high on the figures. Obviously didn't know what was going on. There was no internet in the mid-90s. And just going on holiday, I told this story before in one of our earlier shows. It was just a case of I walked into this little mom and pop store in downtown Kissimmee and found a bone crunching action Series 1 Gold Dust made by Jakks Pacific. Mind was completely blown. What an amazing looking figure. Came with the rubber molded wig for Gold Dust, and that was it. Turning over the card, found out that there was obviously more. There was a monster ring available, which was sensational. As you're 12, 13 years old and you're into collecting, to know that there is a whole new line coming out. Sensational. My mind was completely blown. So that a whole holiday was spent going to Walmart's, Targets, all the other different toy stores, whether it was Toys R Us or KB Toys in America. For our American listeners, you'll know what I'm talking about, back in the old good days of KB Toys. And it was trying to find those other 5 within the line. There was 6 in the line. So we had Gold Dust, Bret the Hitman Hart, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Diesel, and Razor Ramon. Now, Diesel and Goldust were the big ones that I wanted, as well as The Undertaker, only on the basis that it was the purple attire Undertaker, which I didn't have as a Hasbro. So it was trying to find that Diesel. And in my opinion, that Diesel from Series 1 is a great looking figure. I really like that one. But as we found out within the Toys That Made Us, not everybody was as high as I was on the bone crunching action series. So the BCAs were getting quite a lot of flack. Now, as you pick them up moving forward, as time has gone by, what are your opinions, mate, of the BCAs?
Well, to be honest, I've not really had that much that much interaction with them. I've got to be honest. I love the look of the Series 1. I think they look fantastic, and I do at some point want to start bringing them into collection. But like we were just talking off air, there are so many branches to the tree that you could just end up literally spending yourself into a deep hole if you started to go after everything that was available. So I don't think, and this is from a wrestling figure collector, I don't think I've ever actually held a BCA.
Okay, all right. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that's all right. There's something to aim for. There's a grail to look
for. But the thing is with this, obviously, we're carrying on from last week talking about, we're actually, rather than reviewing the figures, we're reviewing Toys That Made Us, the program. And part of the reason that we decided to go over 2 weeks on it is because Toys That Made Us dedicated, bear in mind it's a 45-minute show, they dedicated 14 minutes from the end. They started to talk about Jakks. Now, how can you talk about Jakks and Mattel in 14 minutes when you've just dedicated half an hour to Remco, Galoob, LJN, and Hasbro? And I know Hasbro was a massive line, but what we're actually doing here is we've dedicated half an hour effectively to the first 10 to 12 years of wrestling figures, and then we're dedicating 14 minutes to the 23 years that have followed that. So it's a bit odd, because so just one thing it kind of skipped over, and you could probably answer the question. It does lead into what you're saying. Is it the BCAs that they held up and went, they were basically a bit crap, and the joints were all
that's right,
sort of loose?
Absolutely, and I found that getting my first ever series. So especially for me, the Razor Ramon was really bad. You could just physically see the joints in between the arms. There was a nice little stem in between the joint, and then a big gap between the body and the arm. And as you shook it, it wobbled. The arms wobbled, the legs wobbled. And it was always the thing with me as well, that it promoted bone-crunching action. And these pictures on the box where you can like hear sounds coming out. Well, they never actually made any bone-crunching action. They never actually did anything like that. You could move them slightly, but it was just like a little click in the mold that you could hear. But there was no bone-crunching action to be heard. I think that was real false advertising. But yeah, the figures were pretty garbage, to be honest.
All right, so are they an articulated figure, or is there an action in them a bit like the Hasbro's?
No,
none of that?
there's neither of those at all. So there's no articulation within any of the actual joints. They are literally just legs held onto the hips, and the arms are held on at the shoulders, and the head is movable from side to side. That is the only articulation that you get. There is no elbow joints, wrist joints, knee joints, ankle joints, anything like that. It is just a standard sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 piece figure put together, and put together quite poorly, to be honest, by Jakks. But Jakks were a new company at this time, so they were, albeit they've been around in terms of in the past of what they'd done, but they hadn't taken anything on personally. Their owners had been well into the scheme of things, and in the past, I'm sure they were before. Just having a look through my notes, who was it that picked it up from Jakks? Let's have a little look there. It wasn't Jeremy, was it? It wasn't Peter either. I've got it on my notes somewhere. I'm sure we'll find it. But he used to work for a different toy firm, formed THQ, which ultimately formed Jakks Pacific. So this was probably their first line to come out in terms of actual toys. And they did progress really, really well. So there was the backlash of the figures being pretty much garbage. However, they were a brand that were on the market, and that's what people were looking for. As you progress through, heading up to the year 2000, they'd really sort of got into their swing of things and used R3 real scan technology to be able to actually scan the athletes, scan the wrestlers, and make their products so much more lifelike, which I really, really liked. And then they added all the different interactive features. So they introduced Titantron Live. So they brought out an actual Titantron set that had 2 nice metallic strips at the bottom. The figures all had different leveled strips on the feet, and when you pass them through, their entrance music would play, "Now entering the Titantron." Boom, boom, boom. An ever favourite of mine, and it's still in the loft knocking around somewhere, to be able to play samples of their entrances, which is something different and something that I loved as a kid. I thought that was fantastic. But as you got into the 2000s and they did start to do the R3 technology, some of those figures, the Rulers of the Ring series, is incredible. The Crash Holly, the Ravens, Perry Saturn's, Rikishis were all phenomenal looking figures. They really, really were. And really started Jakks off getting towards that ever popular Classic Superstars line. We love that line.
Yeah, well, that's the line that I remember. Sort of, we have mentioned it before that I collect some the Simpsons stuff, and there's a place in Manchester called Forbidden Planet. I think it's still there. I've not been in for ages. I've not been to Manchester for ages, but in Forbidden Planet, I used to go in to check out the Simpsons stuff, and I remember seeing the line of Classic Superstars and kind of getting a little bit itchy then for the nostalgic thing, going, oh, there's a tugboat, and I always wanted a tugboat, and there was a Dusty, and I just was like, should I or shouldn't I? I ended up not doing it at that point. It was about 2004, 2005. I ended up not going down that route. Right. But it's just, they absolutely stood out. You know, the way that the boxes were, the amount of figures that they were just churning out and it was just every time it was like, what a hit. There's always someone big within the line there. But I think for me, it was just a case of there were so many. As I mentioned before, there's so many branches to the tree. As a wrestling figure.
Oh, there were. Jakks had so
actually,
many.
Yeah, Jakks had so many lines, and this is what I think they were kind of, they weren't really celebrated enough for me. They were skipped over. You know, not even 10 minutes was spent on Jakks, and if you bear in mind, I understand, as we said last week, this program wasn't made for wrestling figure collectors. This program was made just as an entertainment thing. Exactly. Yeah, it's just an entertainment thing for people who are into nostalgia. So it spends a lot of time talking about how the contracts were gained and who did what, and then it goes massively into Hasbro and starts to talk quite a lot about the other lines with wrestling buddies and stuff like that, and the talking figures. I'm looking at both of those as I sit here recording this, But when it gets to Jakks, it kind of, dipped into Jakks. And it even made Jeremy Padawa was on, and he made a comment about what Hasbro did with the Legends line. Not Hasbro, sorry, what Mattel did with the Legends line, and kind of went, well, they used my playbook. But we didn't actually really get to hear what Jeremy's playbook was. He didn't explain much about what they did with Classic Superstars or, all of the different things that preceded Classic Superstars. There are so many lines, and I collect Hogan's. I've got a specific detolf of Hogan stuff, and and I've limited myself not to go down the route of too much Jakks or too much Jakks Hogan stuff. So I've got I've said what I will be doing is Classic Superstars on card, but there are so many other lines that have got Hogan in them, and you just end up going, oh my God, there's a million versions of a very similar figure. Yeah. And I get lost, what's a Titantron? What's a Ruthless Aggression? There are so many lines, and for me, it's kind of like, I'm just going to, it doesn't nostalgically mean anything to me because I wasn't collecting at that point. And
you weren't watching at that point either.
I wasn't watching at that point, so I don't really follow all the characters. I know who the main guys are because I've been back and I've seen them through Classic Superstars or I've watched stuff on the network. But there are so many characters that I kind of go, I've not got a clue who that is, and I've kind of put a bracket around Jakks and kind of gone, at some point I might dip a toe into that. I'm doing Classic Superstars Hogan's, but other than that, I'm not doing anything else with Jakks. Yeah. But I mean, tell me the different lines that were missed out. How would you, if you and I were going to make Toys That Made Us, how it should be made for collectors, or if they did a director's cut, how do you see the Jakks version or the Jakks section going? Where would it start?
Okay, so obviously,
where would it start? What are all the different lines you'd include? And then when we cap it off with Classic Superstars, how deep into Classic Superstars would you have gone?
So for me, obviously, you'd start with the BCAs and you'd work through the Superstar range. Then you could go into the 2-packs. And as a big thing for me as well that I really, really loved was the boxed range that they did. And they did a phenomenal job on the boxed range figures. And they were for collectors. So they had originally the Survivor Series set, which was an amazing red box, and I owned it personally. Sold it for quite a bit, which is always a thumbs up. That included a Goldust, a Bret Hart, a Shawn Michaels, and an exclusive Gold Trunks Ultimate Warrior, which was really, really cool. It was the only one of 2 Jakks Pacific Ultimate Warriors that were available until the Classic Superstars came out, so I had to have them both. Then they did different regional and store exclusives that I'd never seen before. Obviously, Hasbro never did that within a line to have store exclusives, but they did. KB Toys had their own line and Toys R Us had their own line. So they had different 2-packs, whether it be grudge matches. So I'd look towards a nice little exclusive section and what that has become given the popularity of companies like Ringside Collectibles and then also other brands like Target that has the Legends series, Matty Collector that did a nice job on the Legends series back in the day. There's so many different exclusive lines that I'd like to have shot into. But BCA was the first. Then we'd look at box figures. I'd also then slide very nicely into the R3 Scan Titantron Lives. Now, the first 2 or 3 series of Titantron Lives were pants. The actual look of the figures was horrendous. They didn't look anything like the Superstars at all. It was only in 2000 when they brought out the Rulers of the Ring, the SmackDown and the Sunday Night Heat series, that they actually started to look like them, actually look like the characters. So we do a nice section on that, nice section on the scanning, sliding beautifully into things like the Ruthless Aggression series, segue into the 2 very nice nods that they had to WCW and ECW within the Jakks line, and then wrap it off with Classic Superstars. That was the one for me. I was never really interested in the Ruthless Aggression series. Can you hear me? Are we there? I'm here, mate. There we go. We're recording again. That's perfect. In 3, 2, 1. So, and finish it off with the Classic Superstars range. Now, this was a favourite of mine growing up as I got into my 20s. It capped off in 2004, 2005, when I just hit my 20s with the release of the initial Classic Superstars range. Now, the Series 1 was brilliant because it was the first Ultimate Warrior that we'd seen in many a moon, and he hadn't been seen on any kind of WWE, WWF programming for a long, long time, since 1996. So to be able to get a figure of him decked out in his WrestleMania 6 attire was brilliant. So that was something that I needed to get hold of. And the fact that they were stocking them at Toys R Us, that's what I needed to hear, that the UK distributors were getting hold of these figures. And that's a big impact that Jakks had on our collecting, because Jakks had an in to sell in UK stores that a lot of the other different companies didn't have. The original San Francisco toy makers, which produced the ECW line around the similar time, didn't have an in to get their product into UK stores. So anybody that wanted to pick up that ECW line had to import them. Now, WCW, as we're going to slide onto in just a minute with the Toy Biz line, they also had an in, which I found very, very exciting. But let's just touch on the Classic Superstars just a little bit. So from a Classic Superstars basis, was there anybody within the range that was a notable omission? Do you think they missed anybody out from that particular line? And there was a lot of content.
Do you know what? It's funny. It's funny you say that. Yeah, only recently found out a couple of people. So there were no Macho Man, and
Macho Man.
Which just is bizarre, isn't it? I mean, we are producing here a Classic Superstars line.
Yeah.
A line of classic wrestling superstars, and there's no Macho Man in it. It literally is like a cocktail with no alcohol. Like, it's bizarre, the fact that he wasn't in there. And I understand there are sort of certain reasons behind his non-appearance. But you would have thought that they would have done everything they could surely to pick that up. And there was also, I believe, there was no Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, which
Nope.
When you move forward into Mattel, that sort of that 1991 WWF Dragon, the actual full Dragon outfit character is such an amazing figure. That defining moment.
You would have thought. Really is. I love that.
You would have thought that Jakks would have literally been, biting the fingernails to really get that to get that over the line, that deal. But I believe he was going through a divorce or something, Ricky Steamboat, at the time, and that's why he never signed the contract, because basically didn't want anyone else to have the money. I'm assuming.
Well, there you go. He's got his head screwed on. He did it right.
That's it. And that came from Jeremy recently. Actually, that was on Jeremy Padowa's Twitter. Someone had asked why the Steamboat never had a line of CS figures, and Padowa. I think the guy on Twitter had said, why did he never have a Classic Superstars? I believe it's because he was going through a divorce, and Jeremy Padowa just replied with something like, correct or bang on or something like that. So that's why he never. But as far as I'm aware, I think those are two of the only people that I can see that stick out like a sore thumb. There might be people that that didn't have a character that should have done. But
no, they were the two that I was really sort of hinting at, because they were the two big omissions. And as you look through the Mattel line now, especially with the Randy Savage figures, there is such an array of talent, because he was so vibrant and colourful and different, and he flourished within the 80s and the 90s. There is so many different avenues that you can go down when producing a Randy Savage figure, whether it be his initial mid-80s run, which is just the 3-star tights, which is what we initially got with Hasbro, as he progressed through into the Mega Powers era, going through to long tights with the Macho King, coming back in 92 with a full sort of bodysuit, going even further from there, going through into WCW and the NWO. There were so many figures that Jakks could have done, and it must have been Randy Savage himself who held that up. He only very, very briefly, before passing away very sadly, actually got involved with Mattel to be able to produce his figure. One of the last promos that he ever cut, I think, was at Toy Fair in 2010, I'm thinking. And he appeared on screen for the very first time to fans to promote his WrestleMania 7 Defining Moments figure. And if you've not seen that promos, it's an amazing figure. Have you ever seen that promo of Savage turning up at Toy Fair?
I have seen the promo, yeah. So they played it on the big screen at the Toy Fair, and they just went nuts. And I think it's interesting, though, isn't it? Because was he cutting his nose off to spite his face with not allowing them to produce Classic Superstars? Because I believe that, and I might be wrong, but I believe with Classic Superstars there was some kind of deal where Jakks could just go do the deal direct with the talent, and the only input that the WWE had was their name was on the box, and they would have got some kind of royalty off it. But I would have thought that if Randy Savage signed the deal with Jakks for them to produce the Classic Superstars range for him, he would have made a few quid off it. So was he just cutting his nose off to spite his face to say, well, I'm not having my face ever on a WWE product again? Because let's face it, since he's died, he's been on every other product they've ever created. He's been on
everything. Yeah. Everything. I mean, and it's one of those, you don't know which side of the fence that was being argumentative, because it could have been Randy sticking his heels in the mud and trying to work out a best deal for himself, which was what he was really good at, trying to work out the best deal for the Macho Man. So it could have been Randy's camp, but then again, it could have been the WWE's camp as well, because we know that the waters were muddy for a very, very long time between the WWE and Randy Savage. They weren't on the best of terms. There's been lots of rumours flying around there about Stephanie McMahon, which I'm sure Bruce has tried to put to bed on a number of occasions. But there's no smoke without fire. So these instances of that where the WWE didn't want to acknowledge him at all. There was no showing him on any kind of highlight packages. They didn't include him in any kind of publications for a long, long time. And it was only just before he died that things started to get a little bit easier. And working with, as I've watched sort of interviews, podcasts, a number of different features that featured Lanny Poffo, his brother, was that they had reached out to him to appear in the Hall of Fame, and he'd always said no. They always wanted. Well, what Lanny says was that they always wanted them to go in as the Poffo family. So it was Randy, Lanny, and Angelo. And now I don't know how true that is, given that the Genius was never a massive star. Would you have thought that the Genius would be Hall of Fame worthy? What are your thoughts on that?
Not really, no. I mean, it's a funny one really when you look at Hall of Fame, because sometimes you look at who's in it, and you kind of go, really? There are one or two where you just kind of go, should they be there? Sometimes I think they're just there for either to please someone else, or they're just there to, I don't know, because almost like it feels right that we should acknowledge this person, rather than actually there are so many people who are due to be in that Hall of Fame. I mean, only just putting the British Bulldog in there, for crying out loud. And in terms of, obviously because we're British and we know it, but I mean, he was the biggest of the UK stars. Why is it taking so long to get him in there, for crying out loud? I how can I put it? Does he deserve? It's difficult. It's difficult to say no, but I mean, if he does, he shouldn't be in there yet, should he? He shouldn't be in there before the British Bulldog, and he shouldn't be in there before. That's the thing.
I always thought the Genius was of a crop and a level of talent that they could have done a lot with, and when he worked with Perfect, he was brilliant as his Weasley style manager that could also wrestle, which was a great facet that Bobby Heenan had, and Bobby was just the number one. But Lanny had the traits to do that, but he was just never pushed to the moon for it. So why would Randy say he wouldn't go into the Hall of Fame? Now, Randy Savage is one of the biggest names in professional wrestling history. He wouldn't be inducted unless his dad and his brother get inducted as well. So you've always got to look at things with different coloured glasses when a lot of wrestlers talk. It is a case of telephone, telegram, telewrestler. You'll never keep you'll never keep secrets hidden for long. But it's also the case that there is nothing like a little bit of self-promotion. So yeah, if he can get people talking about that, which is what we're doing, then he's done his job and kept his name alive in our business. But we stray away from the subject, which is obviously Jakks that we're talking about right now.
So did the Genius have a Jakks? Did a classic?
He did, yes.
Yeah,
he had a great Jakks figure, a great classic superstar.
Because he's for me, and we'll skip on to it in a minute. He's one that's kind of missing from the Mattel range for me. Because although I'm kind of contradicting myself in terms of does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? Well, the thing is with it, they definitely deserve figures. These guys. Do you know what I mean? Especially when there are so many versions of someone else. I mean, there are literally so many Randy Savages. There are so many. There's 2 or 3 different sort of Mr. Perfects and so on and so forth. There's a million Shawn Michaels. There's a few different versions of Razor Ramon and Scott Hall. And I know these guys are they are much bigger in terms of what happened in professional wrestling history than the Genius. But there isn't one Genius, and we surely just need one Genius.
One Genius, absolutely. Yeah. And I think as well that they should, and they do it to a certain extent on their website, but they should have an area where superstars are acknowledged as alumni before they get inducted into the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, it's a case of, I always remember characters from when I was growing up, because that was the time and that was the era that I was growing up in. And these guys were featured within the Classic Superstars range. So it's people like Repo Man. Obviously never had a Repo Man Mattel figure. We got a Demolition Smash, but we never got a Repo Man. There's Crush, similarly with Demolition. We've not yet got a Kona Crush from Mattel. But it was a case of we had a Kona Crush from Jakks. The Berserker, the Warlord, the Barbarian, Haku, all these characters were amazing characters and amazing personalities as I was growing up. They were a stalwart on our TV each and every week. But I don't think they're necessarily Hall of Fame worthy. Did they draw money to a big extent? And then you have got the question as to why it's taken so long for the British Bulldog to get in. But that's delving deep into the mind of Vince McMahon and the processes of WWE, which I think will become a little bit clearer when the reins are handed over to Triple H and Stephanie. I think they will open the door quite a bit more to their way of thinking. But we'll progress through it. So from the Jakks line, we also saw the two different competition enter the wrestling figure market with the original San Francisco toy makers company bringing out the ECW line. ECW. Did you ever watch any ECW?
No, I've gone back and watched a few bits, but I never literally from '93 that I was out, I was gone. So this is the bit. This is part of this podcast for me because I'm actually learning about the history of wrestling. Like I said before, I mean, when I had to have someone explain to me about what my screw job was, what the Monday Night was, NWO. I didn't know any of it. After WrestleMania 9, pretty much I was completely out. It was phone down and never to call again. So I've got back into this through nostalgia. So this is about the reason kind of behind this podcast is I'm one of those guys that is learning, and I've actually had a couple of people contact me actually saying, I'm in the same boat. I'm going back into this for nostalgia, and I'm finding out about the NWO, and my God, I need an NWO Hogan figure, and they didn't even watch it, but they need the figure so badly. So it's one of those for me where this part especially is with Jakks, and then going on to the sort of Toy Biz stuff. I have no idea. I wasn't in it, and I never watched a Nitro live ever. So.
Oh, well, you did miss out. However, with technology as it is right now and how hard it was for us as tape traders in the past, you've got some classic years that you can catch up on. End of 96, all 97. 97 was my personal favourite year in professional wrestling. 98 was exceptionally good. Leading into 99 and 2000, we were well into the Attitude Era, and we had all the different companies chomping at the bit, trying to alleviate themselves in the ratings war. And make as much money as they possibly could. And one of the avenues that they took was through the toy industry. So you had Jakks producing WWE, you had Original San Francisco producing ECW, and then Toy Biz got hold of the contract for WCW. Now, I really loved the first kind of series of the WCW figures from Toy Biz. I thought they were brilliant because they did have an action. So you could squeeze the legs of Diamond Dallas Page and he would throw up the Diamond Cutter sign above his head. You could bring the arms down on Lex Luger and get somebody in the torture rack. You could do the head smash with the Hollywood Hulk Hogan. And I thought that was different and new and innovative. And they all came with accessories, which was another facet that we hadn't seen for a while. In fact, I'm just trying to think back. There was boxed figures, like you could get an Austin that came with garbage cans and stuff like that, but you could never really get figures straight away from the WWE until the In Your House range that came with accessories. And they only started producing those off the back of the success of Toy Biz's WCW range. So WCW had some great accessories, whether it be sort of a breakaway police line tape. One particular figure which I loved came with a referee, which is another thing that we didn't have. The Giant came with a tiny, I say a tiny, but it was in scale, Rey Mysterio, that's neck extended, so you could put him into the chokeslam. And I thought that was different as well. You actually, to buy a Giant figure, you got like a bonus Rey Mysterio just so you could chokeslam him. And I think Toy Biz did a really, really good job of their WCW line. They got a little bit weird towards the end because they were sort of patterning their stuff from their own mind to begin with, which is what they included within the accessories, and they also started doing colour variants as well, having Scott Hall in the black and white and the red and black. But as they got forward, they started looking at Jakks and thought, I see your Stomp collection, and I'm going to raise it to something even weirder. So they started doing like a Monsters line, which ultimately is what we've seen come back from Mattel. But they did like a weird Vampires line. They did a Jobs line where you had like a Chris Jericho, and because his move was the Lion Tamer, they actually put him out as like a circus performing Lion Tamer. So it came with like a mini platform and a lion and a chair and a whip, which was just weird.
This is where it kind of gets. This is where it gets odd for me because I've seen something. I mean, I've seen this one weird enough that I think is still on the wall in one of the local sort of retro toy shops that are local to where I live. And there's Bret Hart as like a gangster. He's like a 1920s pinstripe wearing kind of, and it's like, what is that? See, for me, I don't ever think I would go down that route. It's like with the Mattel zombies, I've left the zombies alone. I would have got the Hogan probably if it came out, but it's not. That's not what it's about. For me, it's about nostalgia and collecting them. And remember when they were in
remember
this
seeing
particular
what you saw on
entrance
screen as
exactly.
well. Yeah,
So certain entrance attires, it works. So I spoke before about the Macho Man having 100 million Mattel figures, but I've got probably most of those anyway because I remember the entrance for WrestleMania 7. I remember the entrance for when he did the run-in at SummerSlam, not SummerSlam, at Royal Rumble 91 and so on and so forth. So for me, doing it in different attires works really, really well, but doing these weird, like, gangster, lion taming, whatever.
Yeah, weird mashups. They just didn't work, no. And that for me as well, that turned me off to the line quite a bit. So then they started producing the WCW uncensored figures, which included newer talent like Shane Douglas and Mike Awesome, Vampiro, that just didn't really look like them. So they'd gone from these caricature-esque figures, which were really cool, with the smash and slams. Then they had weird ones that had magnets in the fists, so you could brawl with them. They did a tag team range and a two-pack range that included Macho Man and Elizabeth, which I thought was brilliant. They did a box collection, but then when they started going down like the Bash at the Beach line, which was all the figures had like water squirting action, and you could buy a floatable ring. Oh, put me right off.
Yeah.
And
that's
as a collector, I've seen a lot within the market now of people that are looking to pick these up just because they need to finish the WCW line, but because nobody bought them, they're really, really rare now. So to try and get hold of them, they're costing a pretty penny. If you want that Bash at the Beach ring, you're looking at a good couple of £100, easy. But yeah, it's weird, and that's collecting itself. If something isn't popular when it first comes out and becomes a peg warmer, once you go down the line, you go 10 years down the line, because nobody's got them, their values shoot up, which is mad to think of, really.
It's bananas, isn't it? And it's kind of how many people know, in the collecting industry, how many people, collecting community, how many people know that, but yet still don't buy the peg wall. I'm the same. Sometimes I go, I should just buy that because nobody wants it, and then 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line, it's going to be worth a bloody fortune. I mean, the way things are going, in 3 weeks it'll be worth a fortune. But how many times do we leave peg warmers there to warm the pegs because actually, we don't want it. But the reality is, if we just put it in the loft for a bit, in a few years' time, it's the kind of thing that would creep up because
absolutely,
because no one was buying it.
That's it, and figures do appreciate the rarer that they are, obviously. And if nobody else owns them and people want them, then if the demand for them is high and the supply is low, then that's how you make a return on any kind of investment. Yeah. So for any advice to our new collectors, pick up things that you think that nobody else will buy. When you walk into a Smith's or you walk into anywhere that sells toys and you see that figure just hanging there and all of a sudden it goes on sale, it might be an idea to pick it up just to keep in a box, in your attic, in your loft, down in your basement, and just keep it out of sight for a little bit. Because I'm sure that somewhere down the line, you're going to have someone who is looking for it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think that's it. And for me, that's where, as a collector, getting your hand on the real rare stuff. So getting your hand on the green cards. That's when it kind of all makes sense. Like finally, because generally as well, that's the last stuff that you're buying. So if you got the ability to go, well, I'll buy a couple of these because in a few years' time I'll shift them on, or I'll keep one and shift one on. That for me that's the way to go where possible.
Absolutely. And I mean, just finishing off from Jakks and wrapping it all up in a nice little bow with the Classic Superstars line, it follows that exact trend with the final series of Classic Superstars. There was no new Superstars featured. All they were colorways. So they were different painted, and they weren't even painted amazingly well. It was just a little nod, a little difference in their particular attires. And they put them out, whether it was Bret Hart wearing jeans or it was Roddy Piper wearing a different t-shirt with a different head. That was all it was from the Classic Superstars line. But as it was the last series, not many people picked them up because they might not have been as widely available. But because everybody already had a Piper, everybody already had a Bret Hart.
Yeah,
they left them on the pegs.
I say, and generally, they, because there's less effort put in, they are effectively a more boring version of what you've already got. And when you're not doing it for investment as such, you kind of just go, oh, well, that's a bit of a crap figure. We'll leave that where it is. But the reality is, what you need to be doing is buying them by the carton. And put, because
Yes.
can you imagine buying green cards by the carton back in the day?
Oh, wow. Could you imagine?
Bought a box of 12 or something, put it up in the loft for a bit. Go on and bet it. You pay your mortgage.
It'd be phenomenal. I saw a meme the other day, and it was just like a late 80s, early 90s picture from inside Toys R Us, and you look at it, and I think the meme was like, how much would all this be worth now? And you look at all that mint on card stuff, and anybody that had just bought that line, it might have cost them a couple of £1,000, couple of $1,000 to buy that row within Toys R Us.
Yeah.
Now they would be worth 100,000 easy for the amount of stuff that you could sell from that particular line.
It's nuts, isn't it?
Mad.
Well, it's interesting actually, because that could segue us quite nicely, unless you've got anything to kind of top off with the Toy Biz stuff. But that kind of segues quite nicely into Mattel, because what we were talking about just before we came on air, because Mattel kind of opened up, certainly from my collecting thing is the I can't even get my words out this morning, Tom, is the Legend series. So when was that the first thing out from Mattel, or did we have anything before that?
Mattel did 3 different series. They did they did the oh, my mind's gone blank. They did the deluxe, what we now know as the Elite. So they did the Aggression series, which were lots of articulation, very fine detail. They also did a Basic series, and they then announced that they were going to do a Deluxe Legends series. And I got really excited about this initially because we were going to get the first ever Ricky Steamboat. That was the one that was always missing from my Classic Superstars collection, as we discussed a little bit earlier. So I got really, really excited. And also, within that series, you got an Austin, you got a Sergeant Slaughter, which was different because this was like early 80s Sergeant Slaughter, white vest, blue US Corp pants, which was a brilliant figure. You got a Dusty Rhodes, which was in the polka dot attire. And the LOD were another one that I really, really wanted because it was AWA, NWA, black shoulder pads, different face paint style Legion of Doom. It was completely new, completely different than what we'd ever seen, whether it was done by Hasbro or Jakks.
And this is the thing, and none of this is discussed on Toys That Made Us. I mean, the Toys That Made Us thing, like I mentioned last week, 4 minutes and 33 seconds from the end, they start to talk about Mattel. How can you talk about 10 years of what is quite possibly the best, certainly in terms of how they look, wrestling figures, and there are a zillion Mattels. How can you talk about what Mattel have done, how Mattel have done it, and at no point did they kind of go into the unreleased stuff, not from any of the ranges anyway. And this is one thing I said last week. It should be a director's cut, which you wouldn't have thought would cost them that much more money, a couple of days maybe for the editor, but. Then for maybe do a subscription thing where you sign and you pay a couple of quid a month or a one-off charge of £10, but you get access to these director's cuts where we could what we're doing now is kind of talking about what we think should have been on that show. And I know that we've spoken for almost 2 hours and barely scratched the surface. I know they couldn't literally give us everything, but there was no mention of, going back to the Hasbros, there's no mention of Greg the Hammer Valentine. There's no real mention of anything, even right up to through Jakks and into the Mattel stuff. about what, for example, why could they not have a Randy Savage or a Steamboat in the classic superstars range? It wasn't there. And also the thing is, I mean, Randy Savage is such a beaming omission. It's like it literally is. It's so obvious that Randy isn't in that range that you need to say, hang on a minute, we couldn't. This is why we couldn't have Randy in the range. It's the fact that it's not mentioned is almost it's skipping over it far too quickly. One thing, just talking about Randy and things that are unreleased, and whilst we're on Mattel, and I don't know if you put this in your notes or I don't know if I was seeing things, but when they do the little on Toys That Made Us, when they put a couple of figures on a turntable and have it rotating, there was a Macho Man and Liz WrestleMania 7. So Liz was in that kind of black and white
the
star jumper.
Star jumper, yeah.
Is that figure out? I've never seen that figure.
No, they didn't actually release it. It was meant to come down. One of the features that they did say on the Toys That Made Us were they did want to have a big emphasis on women's figures. So yes. With the impact of the women's revolution, changing from divas into the full women's division, they did want to incorporate a lot more of the female superstars with their own particular line. So they had them as their basics and their elites, but they also wanted to introduce them as a Barbie style figure as well. So the figures that you saw were on display at Toy Fair, and they did get Netflix did get a chance to take a nice little turntable shot of them as well. But it was of the WrestleMania 7 Macho Man Randy Savage and Elizabeth never got released. So it was one of those where they show something and then hold it back. Now, could it get released down the line? I hope so. It'd be something that I'd like to see. But the Barbie line never did very well. Even if you go into like a TK Maxx now, they're the range that got picked up way down the line, and they'll have got them for dirt cheap because they're selling them for like £4.
Yeah.
So even on that basis of what we were talking about buying them to stick in the loft and out the way, I might give the Barbie range a miss. Yeah, it's weird because even my daughter, who's obsessed with stuff like Barbie, she looks at them and we're like, "No, I'm all right, Dad. Thanks."
That's it, isn't it?
Yeah,
just going back to that then on that shot on Toys That Made Us with the Liz and the Macho Man, was the Macho Man not the Macho Man that we got from Defining Moments?
No, different one. Completely different one. And it was in scale with the Barbie size figures, which are larger size figures. It's like an 11-inch figure. So they're a decent size.
So would you have bought a Barbie Macho Man?
Yes. Yeah. If it came as a 2-pack in a nice arrangement, Macho and Liz, I'd have definitely bought that. Now, it just sort of segueing weirdly into different collecting habits, but keeping on the same subject. I collect a lot of Ghostbusters stuff, very into that film and into that brand and franchise. And Ghostbusters actually did a Matty Collector San Diego Comic-Con exclusive Ghostbusters Monster High doll mashup, weird mashup. But I had to buy it, so that's in the collection in the loft, accruing money as we speak. So yes, I do have a weird only one doll, but yes, I'd have bought that one just for the
so there's an interesting thing about where I kind of go with this is you talk about buying a doll. If you go to very shortly, or not if, but when I go to Smith's and buy the SummerSlam Liz in the yellow. Am I buying a doll or am I buying an action figure?
An action figure, because it's not of the same scale as a Barbie doll.
So that's the one thing I've for want of a better term, wrestled with the fact that when I bought the Liz in the green thing, it was very cheap from I think everywhere I had it, but I think I ended up getting it from Home Bargains for like £6 or £7. But I did go to the till effectively with a doll. It's a girl in a dress. There's it's and that's the weird thing with it, because I get a few ribs from my mates going, that's a doll, mate. That's a doll. But just going back to the Mattel stuff, weirdly enough, I bought my green card Hasbro's and my mail away Hogan. And bear in mind, I bought my mail away Hogan graded in 2014 for, it was either 80 or 90 quid. I think it was 80 quid.
Wow.
And I handed over that 80 quid for that Hogan, thinking, this is a £4 toy. And I'm giving him 80 quid. What kind of nutcase am I? I no longer regret giving him that 80 quid or 90 quid. And I bought
it's crazy, isn't it? It's mad how things appreciate like
it's
that.
Bananas. And I bought the green cards off the guy. And he was saying that he was getting rid of he was selling his Hasbro collection because he wanted the Mattel stuff. And he said, have you seen the Mattel line? I was like, no, I haven't. I was at the time, 2014, 15, whatever. I was only buying the Hasbros for nostalgic reasons, that it was Hasbro that I was that I collected as a kid. And it was just really bizarre that he sold those to me so that he could get the money to go and buy the Hasbro, to buy the Mattel Legends line, because they were so good. And he was like, mate, you want to see these figures. I didn't bother. But what's really bizarre is I reconnected with that guy this week on Facebook. I've not seen him or spoke to him since then. And weirdly enough, he's selling some Mattel stuff because he wants to buy Hasbro's back.
Wow, mad. I bet he's kicking himself that he let go of those green
He
cards.
is absolutely kicking himself. Yeah, he's so... he sounded so gutted, on the messages. The tone of his messages were like, man, I really, really wish I'd not done that. But yeah, so he's selling his Mattel collection, or certain parts of his Mattel collection, in order to bring the Hasbros back into his fold. But yeah, I mean, it's really bizarre with the Mattels, because the line they've produced is so phenomenal. It's untrue. So in terms of how would you have with Toys That Made Us, then how would you have positioned the Mattel stuff? Because basically what Mattel have produced is this amazing set of Legends line, and then a zillion other what seem to be mostly Randy Orton figures.
Randy Orton and John Cena figures.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. How would you have delivered the Mattel line onto Toys That Made Us?
I think it should have had a lot more emphasis, but we did sort of touch on it a little bit earlier. 23 years of toy making, which was from Jakks, Toy Biz, original, and from Mattel itself, were wrapped up literally in a matter of 10 minutes. So they should have given that particular show 2 parts, I believe. But again, it's down to whether or not the Joe Blogs off the street, who is just watching it for a bit of nostalgia, wants to watch 2 episodes on wrestling figures. I would certainly want to watch 2 episodes on wrestling figures, but there was so much that they missed off there. They could have gone further detail into Legends and what it meant to them to be able to reach out and get hold of some of these legends, people like the Von Erichs that we'd not seen in a classic superstar line. That was another big omission, that we never got a Texas Tornado. There was loads of different avenues that they could look towards as to things that they had produced, that they had built up to, different accessory lines. There was loads. It felt very, very rushed to me. And there was a lot of emphasis on the women's revolution, which is a big thing currently, but as a collector, I wasn't too strong with it. I wasn't. Like you, I'd buy an Elizabeth, and I'd probably buy lesser known talent like a Wendy Richter, or I'd probably search out a sensational Sherry. But I'm not too bothered about collecting a Charlotte Flair or a Sasha Banks right now. Yeah. So I think from spending like a minute talking about that, albeit they probably did because it's PC to do that. I think that minute could have been spent on something else that collectors would have probably appreciated a little bit more. But they did. They just scratched the surface. They just scratched the surface on it. So it was nice at the end. What I did like at the end of the Toys That Made Us, just to wrap this review up into a bubble, I did like the way that they showed screenshots of collections from fans, from actual collectors. I really like that. because you did get a glimpse into what everybody else does, whether it was displaying their figures, which lines they went for. Did they go down a particular character or superstar route like you do with Hogan? Did they go down a particular line route like a Legends line or a Hall of Fame line, which is what I do? And it was nice seeing different ways that people collect them. Some put them on the wall, mint on cards. Some have them in nice display cases, loosey-goosey. So these different ways, and I like that. That was a highlight for me, to see what other people did. And it is all part of our community. I love seeing how other people collect. It's a big thing for me, and it's why I like being part of a lot of the Facebook groups and the Instagram posts and seeing what other people do. So I thought they wrapped it up nicely in that. But to go for an actual review, Mark, what would you rate? What would you grade the toys that made us on wrestling figures?
It's a difficult thing.
Let's do it out of 10.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? Because the reality is, if we're saying to someone who maybe is like an old schoolmate of mine who's not into collecting and they watch it, I think it was quite high. I think probably a good 8. But for a collector, didn't really tell me anything I didn't know. It's kind of a generous 6, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I was going to go 6. From me personally, and that's singing from the same hymn sheet as that. I didn't find out much that I didn't know. There was a few little snippets, and there was like, oh, okay. Find out about Jewish Lightning was always the best thing. Bonus.
That was the best thing about the whole thing. Jewish Lightning needs a figure now. That's what needs to happen.
Absolutely.
But the thing is with that is that the way I'm looking at it is when I look at the other episode. So I collect some really old school Ninja Turtle stuff. I'm not into the line at all. I've just got effectively the 1988-89 range, which is what I had, and I'm not going any further into that. So actually, when I watched the Ninja Turtles one, I actually really enjoyed Ninja Turtles. It was a good 8 or 9 for me because I didn't need to know about the characters that were missing. It was just a case of I found out about the line. A brief synopsis, basically, about the line. So for that reason, there isn't any reason why the wrestling one would be any different than that. Do you know what I mean? If you're not deep into it like we are, if you're just a general, let's watch this for a bit of nostalgia, we'll have a brew or a beer and something to do. That for me is why I think we, as a 6 from a collector's point of view, we're actually probably underselling it to someone who isn't a collector because it's probably an 8 or 9 to them. So.
No, completely appreciate it. Well, thank you, Netflix, for bringing us this amazing series. Like Steve's just said, we didn't want to undersell it. That rating was from a collector's basis. But for anyone that has yet to check it out, please head over onto Netflix, do a nice little search in your taskbar and find the toys that made us. They do a brilliant array of different nostalgic trips down memory lane, ranging from everything from He-Man to Lego to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Power Rangers. There's stuff for every fan from the 70s, 80s and 90s. Well worth a look. Now, before we put a nice little bow on this episode today, we're going to look at hits and misses. We're going to look at our hits and misses, and my week this week is my hit. So seeing as we have just wrapped up the toys that made us in the Mattel line, my hit is going to be a Mattel, and it's quite a recent figure, but it's one that I'm sure will accrue in value. It is the Ultimate Edition Ultimate Warrior from the 1998 Halloween Havoc. What a great figure. Have you got this in your collection?
I have got this in my collection. Yeah, I've got a little WCW NWO kind of thing going on. I have it. I think it's a great figure. Yeah, and I think it's the only Halloween Havoc Warrior available in any line. I believe
it is absolutely the only Halloween Havoc Warrior available in any line from probably the worst match in wrestling history. If you haven't seen it, go back, watch it, grab a beer, and laugh all the way through it. The fact that Hogan can't throw a fireball, it is. Have you ever seen it? Have you ever seen that match? Oh, you need to watch it. Take the time, go and jump on the WWE Network, boot up Halloween Havoc, and just get ready for a total debacle. But this figure is brilliant. The fact that it comes with 2 Ultimate Warrior heads, one from the initial run, and one from after the match where his paint is worn. The colours are very vibrant and different. The detailing on the tights and the trunks and the coat, exceptional. So that this week is my hit. What's your miss, brother?
So my miss this week is, again, is a really recent one. So far, in fact, actually, it's so recent, we've not yet got our hands on it. But from looking at the pictures, it's a huge miss. And the miss is the Greg the Hammer Valentine from Mattel. See, for me, why is at least the chase not the rhythm and blues? This is what I don't get. You know, there is, when you look at in fact, rhythm and blues Greg's, and it's kind of weird because why are we so bothered about it? Because it was a rhythm and blues Greg actually a great character as a wrestler? No, but because of the sort of the law of the Mattel, not the Mattel, of the Hasbro, it didn't come out, and it's massive for a collector. We just want an actual rhythm and blues Greg. Now the one that Jakks put out was crap. It didn't have the jacket, so what we need is we need a Greg the Hammer Valentine with the black hair, with the white coat, that is effectively a Mattel version of what Hasbro should have released. We need that. And there was a perfectly lined up there from Mattel to give us a good rhythm and blues Greg. And what did we get? We got a variant on boring, normal, yellow trunks, black trunks Greg. What a pain in the ass. Give us the proper thing. So actually, if you're a customizer and when that comes out, you can customize something properly for me, because I've got a honky tonk man waiting to be tagged up with a rhythm and blues Greg. And is there a rhythm and blues Greg? No.
I thought the perfect line as well for a rhythm and blues Greg. Now they've got the rights to produce him, and they brought him out in this Legends line. Was an actual Retrofest rhythm and blues Greg. That'd have been great to have them on there to feature within that line and bring it to an even number as well. I'm weird about even numbers, so there's only 7 in that line. So I'm begging them to make one more just so that I've not got that itch.
It's just
but yes, so that was your miss this week. Okay, so we are still waiting on those figures to come out, which is the Legends line. Whether or not any UK distributors are going to pick them up over here, but hey ho, that is just the way it goes. So from us this week, I'm going to wrap things up in a nice little bit of a rush, just as a nod to the toys that made us. We are going to close things out for us this week. Check us out next week. We're going to do a nice little feature on a bit more of the Hasbro line. We're going to do a nice little in-depth look at the Green Card series. So join us for Green Cards next week. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen to us. Hope you enjoyed the show as our second half of the Toys That Made Us review came to you this week on the UK Wrestling Figure Podcast. I've been Tom Figiel. He has been Steve Taylor. We will see you all next week. Take care, guys. Bye.